Let's talk about why Shane sticks better than a character like Tarzan. When I was first getting into pulp stories, particularly heroic fantasy, I started with the short stories of Conan the Barbarian and Tarzan of the Apes. My local used bookstore had lots of Ballantine copies of the Tarzan series. After I read Tarzan of the Apes and liked it, I decided I would begin my journey to pulp immersion by collecting the entire Tarzan series. But after reading one of the sequels, I believe it was Tarzan and the Golden Lion, my love dwindled. I bought one or two more, put them on my shelf, never read them, and eventually stopped buying them altogether. Just this last week, I was thrift shopping with my wife and there was a whole collection someone had dropped off of beautiful Frazetta cover Tarzans, and I didn't buy them. I knew even if I liked Frazetta's art, I'd never get around to actually reading them. My initial justification for this was simply the stories are too repetitive. Someone gets captured, Tarzan rescues them, some evil animal or person or force rears up out of the jungle, and Tarzan vanquishes them. Even The Land That Time Forgot, my favorite thing I've read by Burroughs, followed this same tired cycle of capture and escape, or rescue, and then fight and win. Even with what little I'd read, I'd felt I'd seen the entirety of Burroughs' plotting tricks, and I was already tired of them. The Land That Time Forgot was only memorable for the imaginative dinosaur world and the mystery of the island, which seemed to geographically follow some sort of afterlife, where one side is primitive and dangerous and miserable, and the other is advanced and beautiful. I thought perhaps Burroughs was attempting some sort of pulpy retelling of the Divine Comedy, but he wasn't. It was just my own brain searching for meaning in what was ultimately just another adventure story. Anyway, what makes the perspective in a book like Shane so effective? The whole story is from the vantage point of a young boy, maybe 10 or 12, named Richard, or Bob, as he's referred to. This allows the reader to see Shane as mythical because we're seeing him through the idealizing eyes of a child. To Bob, Shane is a Superman, and so he becomes that to us. All of Bob's supposing and impressions of Shane's physical capabilities and intentions underneath his movements are seen in the most perfect light because Shane is worshipped by Bob, and so that viewpoint is logical to the reader as well. There's a natural unreliability to the perspective of a young boy that allows us, the reader, to believe along with our narrator the pedestals Bob puts him on, and that allows us to question them as well as the reader, which adds a layer to the character. You see this in a lot of introductions to characters in fantasy, western, and action pulps in general through the local legends trope. Townfolk gossiping, grunt workers around the water cooler in a spy headquarters, kids reenacting the exploits of Robin Hood or Zorro. The detriment of this technique is that it's left behind after the first few introductory scenes. To Schaefer's credit, he maintains it through the entire story. That's why Shane ascends traditional Western adventure. With Burroughs, the perspective is third-person omniscient, occasionally dipping into close when we need to know what Tarzan is thinking or feeling. Either way, a voice in the sky expressing admiration for the hero undermines the tension of the story. Burroughs can simply tell us what Tarzan's good at, and we're left with a sort of take it or leave it as the readers. But all of Tarzan's success is weighed upon what the narrator tells us. Here, let me show you. As the success and happiness of jungle dwellers, nay, even life itself, is largely dependent upon their powers of observation, Tarzan had developed his to a high degree of perfection. At his first encounter with this party, he had made himself familiar with the faces, physiques, and carriages of all its principals and of many of its humble warriors and porters, with the result that he was immediately aware that Colt was no longer with the expedition. See, we're told by the narrator that he's good at observing and then left to watch as he proves it, which is adequate, but doesn't really stick. And Burroughs uses this technique throughout Tarzan's action and all of the times he overcomes something. He tells us he's good, and then Tarzan does the thing he's good at to success. Compare that to Shane with Bob's outside childlike observation and how it creates engagement for the reader. He picked up his drink and savored it, one elbow on the bar, not shoving himself forward into the room's companionship, and not withdrawing either. Just ready to be friendly if anyone wanted that, and unfriendly if anyone wanted that too. See, to Bob's perspective, Shane is perfectly ready for whatever comes his way. But as readers, we can understand that Shane is standing in this saloon surrounded by roughneck ranchers who are ready to beat him up, and take in Bob's perspective with a grain of salt. We're thinking that perhaps Shane might be feeling some fear, but that he's hiding it, or that he's tensing, ready in ways that Bob can't see, and that adds immersion and depth to the writing. With Bob's observations and narrations throughout the story, the stakes are raised. Not only are we concerned for Shane's role in the ranch feud, but also for his reputation to Bob, how Bob sees him, because Shane represents an ideal, pure goodness, which even transcends the laws of civilization, eventually pitted against pure evil when the harsh but legally rightful ranchers decide to break the trust of civilization first by bringing in a pure evil killer to sway the contest of ranch holdings in their favor. Both characters, Shane and Tarzan, do the overcome trials through grit thing. This is really the ultimate way to do action. All the prose and style in the world eventually boils down to the binary. The hero is pitted against the opposition and either triumphs or fails. The difference is that Schaefer allows Shane's overcoming of the stump to feel earned, because we never lose the perspective of Bob. Shane maintains a mythic hero exterior to Bob and to the reader right until the very end of the story, when the reader is finally allowed to realize Shane's humanity and vulnerability following the conflict with the tyrannical ranchers. Bob sees Shane get shot, and what does Shane do? He hides the pain and suffering from Bob, and we as readers are aware of that hiding. Schaefer only took away Shane's invincible persona when his character had changed enough to carry it himself. Shane would endure for Bob, so his childlike perspective of good triumphing over evil wouldn't shatter. That deepens the character and sort of makes the ride into the sunset ending not even matter, at least in terms of what actually happens to Shane. Whether he rode off to more adventure and heroism or died of wounds 2 days later, he's already completed the cycle of the hero. He's done his work, that's the point. Conversely, in Tarzan, the hero overcomes the obstacles ultimately in order to survive until the next adventure. Not to say he doesn't do good or vanquish evil in the process, but really Tarzan is just there to prove once again that he's the king of the jungle, the ultimate man, etc. It's the pitfall of a long-running series. Eventually you run out of meaningful things for the character to realize or fight for, and the stakes must be contrived simply through the plot and the physical action. At a certain point, Burroughs was not building a character. He was building the Edgar Rice Burroughs Foundation. In the modern day, which Burroughs kind of helped pioneer, we see this as franchise or brand building. A certain blasé comes of seeing the next Spider-Man or Ninja Turtles movie because you know the plot is either going to set up the next movie with another villain or conclude only to be rebooted and have everything start over with new paint. That's ultimately one of the flaws of pulps in general. I don't want you to think I'm merely picking on Burroughs, even though I've spent the whole video doing so. When stories are serialized and the audience's demand for a certain character or type of story outweighs the singular narrative, the author eventually begins to retcon, or in some cases simply omit growth for the sake of a broad reset. The character returns home, it's the end of a hero's journey, but the only thing that's different is that the threat from chapter 1 isn't a threat anymore. As writers, we obviously want to write something that endures, like Shane, and I doubt anyone would argue with the success, financial and otherwise, that Burroughs had, but I don't think his road to success exists for pulp writers anymore. Better to write something that sticks and let actual success fall where it may. So, play around with perspective, especially if you want to have a character with some mythic qualities in your story. After all, mythology was meant to be told among communities. Grow your character through the lens of another. A youngster, a teacher, a common bystander, maybe even the villain. Don't be afraid to break away from the perspective of your protagonist for a chapter. You can always burn it. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. Quick channel update, on June 26th, I'll be going live with Pulp Mortem and Barely Human for EBS, the Elusive Exclusive Book Society, and we're reading the Space Olympics. So I'll post more about that on the channel as it draws near, but make sure you tune in. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep reading.